Welcome to the Keeping It Real podcast by Real World Academy, where we hear from top educators, entrepreneurs, and creative thinkers on how to design your future. Hi, everyone. Welcome to episode 6 of the Keeping It Real podcast by Real World Academy. I'm Domenico Randazzo, songwriter and music producer and co-founder of Real World Academy. I'm here with my co-host and cousin, Dr. Anthony Longo, also a co-founder of Real World Academy. We also have our Chief Strategy Officer, Lincoln Farquharson here, and one of our facilitators and mental health experts, Misha, Stewart. And today's episode is largely going to be about mental health, which is something that's definitely necessary to talk about in 2020, especially as it pertains to educating the youth and making sure that our educators are equipped with the skills and the support necessary to mentor our youth. And luckily, we have a diverse team. We have a very robust staff at Real World Academy with a variety of different specialties. I work in entertainment. I'm not entirely sure how that helps, but we have a doctor here and 2 people in education. So I think this is going to be an interesting conversation.
Absolutely, and your expertise in entertainment gives a different perspective, a perspective many students share. So it'll be great.
True.
Absolutely.
And just as a reminder to our audience, Real World Academy lets any high school student hire an agent, which is a customized counselor and life coach. Simply having an agent does not mean that you will succeed. You have to take initiative and self-actualize. Real World Academy does offer training in social emotional learning, and we incorporate it into our mentoring and coaching sessions, as well as freestanding curriculum that we develop for schools. We'll be talking a lot about what that means today, social emotional learning. And for high schools and colleges, Real World Academies offers a custom curriculum, which we can cater towards your needs. And so contact us for more details regarding that. So I guess just to start, welcome, Misha. And
thank you.
We wanted to start off with just the basic question: what is emotional wellness?
So thank you guys first for having me here, inviting me into this space. These conversations are important, not just because of what's happening globally, but they're just important just for people in general. Just kind of looking at yourself just as humanitarians and just wanting the best, the wellness for our young people and then for ourselves. So when we talk about social emotional wellness, it's, as the word has, right? It's 2 components. How are you socially well? How do you engage with people? And those have their own layered aspects. And then you think about your emotional wellness. And I always kind of use the analogy that there's a very unique thread that ties your head to your heart, right? So how we feel is really is focused a lot on what we're thinking, what's going on, our perception. And so when we're talking about the social emotional wellness, it's how do we engage and navigate in our spaces? How do we navigate the waters of our life from a sound emotional space where our baseline is healthy and healthy in the sense that we're able to manage our emotions well. We're able to identify what those emotions are. We have an idea of what things trigger those emotions. We're very conscious of our behaviors and those things that may have us kind of operating a little outside of what would be our norm for some, and operating in a space that is healthy for us. Our exchanges are healthy. They don't heighten our anxiety or bring us into spaces of depression or sadness on a frequent basis. And then just what are our thoughts, right? How are we able to just center ourselves? How are we able to stay focused, right? Thinking about our mindfulness. Are we perseverating on things over and over and over to the point that they interrupt our daily life? They interrupt how we engage people. And then we talk about our social wellness, that what are those people, those factors, those engagements that we have every day, and how do those things pour into our lives, right? So we have things that are faucets and we have things that are drains. So there are some things in our life that are constantly pulling at us. And there are some things in our life that are just kind of pouring and replenishing. So as we're thinking about like what our social and our emotional wellness is, how are those things between head and heart regulating themselves? And then how are we moving in our space so that we are also a fountain in some spaces and we may be a drain, we may be taking from some, but the cycle of replenishment is done in a healthy manner.
And is social wellness something that's traditionally taught in schools, or is this something that's generally lacking in the curriculum at any grade level?
So, I find that on some level, you get this in education, right? There's an elementary or pre-K level, they're doing character development, how students are utilizing I statements. I'm talking from how I feel, letting you know something that's offended me, how I'm able to identify what these interactions are with my peers, identifying my feelings, locating those with, you may have a sign that has different expressions and students being able to identify the expression and match with their feelings. As we move into our upper grade levels, you're doing character building and you're looking at more developmentally where students are just in how they connect with each other, right? How they identify with people, how they want to associate with groups. Versus kind of being isolative or feeling inferior. And then as we move into like our teenage areas, just kind of where you're starting to identify where you're going to be going in your life. So on, I think the surface level, that's always been there, right? It's been integrated in various contents. You talk about it in English, if you're talking about Shakespearean, pieces of literature, you're always looking at the different characters in his pieces and trying to draw inference. There are emotions that are going on. What's the trigger behind the behavior? Why is he having this whole monologue? Why was Romeo so hard? Really just like, I gotta get Juliet, like that's my girl. Like, what are those emotions that they're experiencing? What I find probably in the last decade is that there have been different frameworks that schools are utilizing to have these conversations in a little richer fashion with students, right? So it's not just looking at just kind of developmentally where they are and we'll sprinkle it around. I think the awareness of mental health and the impact on academics achievement has become of a greater importance. And that's even though that mental health and mental wellness is always important, I think they're seeing the correlation between student achievement, which is a good thing, right? Because then you have school leaders, district leaders that are saying, we got to talk about this, right? They understand how trauma really impacts a lot of our young people. And trauma, not that, trauma just started in the last 10 years, but they're able to see, and it's not even an urban school thing, right? So we're not going to say that all kids in urban schools experience trauma like our rural and suburban schools. But when people understand what trauma is and how that impacts their thinking and how they're able to manage their emotions and their focus and staying in class, we're able to see that schools are utilizing different organizations and licensed practitioners. Right? We're not just getting a book, send you to a PD for about an hour and say, hey, teachers, now you guys go teach mental wellness to your school. They're recognizing that we need to have individuals who are licensed, who are practitioners, who understand this to not only teach our students, but we need to teach the adults so that the adults are understanding and also so that the adults are well, because the adults standing in front of children that are not mentally and emotionally well make it very difficult to deliver content appropriately.
That's something I was going to mention, and this leads me to another question. You use this metaphor of faucets and drains in describing ways in which you could potentially be infected with anxiety and ways in which you can relieve yourself of anxiety. Both for the students and for the teachers, what do you think is the biggest faucet or the biggest reason for this influx of anxiety? And how would they overcome it, considering the circumstances?
So I think one of the things we're having this, I did led a wellness series for our staff and our students last week. We kind of had our team of support staff. And what's unique about where we are now is that we have two pandemics that are going on. Right? We have a medical pandemic with COVID-19, and then we have a mental health pandemic. And this is impacting everyone. So in a space where you may have students who are just kind of experiencing life in whatever capacity they do, and the adult is just kind of adulting, not able to connect, we're in a very unique position. Everyone is experiencing the exact same thing, and they're being impacted in very, very similar ways. So I think the area that's probably the greatest of drain for people is just still trying to manage life with the expectations of work and learning, right? So for teachers, there's still the expectation to deliver this instruction with this richness, with this rigor. There's the expectation that you are needing to connect with families and students, maybe not at the same intensity as before, but that's still there. While students are expected to kind of just and receive this information almost at the same pacing, graduation expectations and requirements haven't changed. You still need 130 credits to graduate. You're still expected to pass classes. You may have standardized tests that, may have kind of, maybe waived in some places, but there's still the requirements and the demands that are still there. I think another challenge is that on both sides, everyone's still managing life while doing it simultaneously, right? I am literally sitting in my son's playroom because if I were in my office, it may be a little too loud for them. And I have to think about when I'm working, where can I position myself and who is my audience that may allow for a little more flexibility. And I'm also like mother, social worker, I do a social justice curriculum, doing that. I have church stuff, I have sorority stuff. And I'm at home and I'm like the principal, I'm the custodian, I'm the daycare provider. I have a 1-year-old. I am the plumber, I'm the gardener, I am the school nurse, and sometimes I just want to be somebody's, just girlfriend, just hanging out. And I can't quite do that because I'm here all the time. And, that's hard.
And you're also tech support.
Yes, I am. I literally have mastered I feel like I've mastered the WebEx platform and Zoom. And I literally did a Zoom birthday party for my 1-year-old. And I'm like holding the cake. My husband's at work. I'm trying to give this kid over here. They're like, we can't hear you. Pin your video. I'm like, give me a minute. Give me a minute.
And that's the thing, right? You got to do all those. Plus, you have to master this. You have to master this, because if you don't master this, all that other stuff gets put to the side. Like you can't do none of the other stuff. So,
Absolutely.
If you don't have the right equipment, if you don't have the right technology, if you don't have the right services, like it's a wrap. And that's another layer of stress to be put on you, regardless of age, or socioeconomic background, to be quite honest. The richest person, if you're not computer competent, then you're just not going to be computer competent.
Yeah. And I think the reason why, Kamisha, you're able to do all those things, it ties directly into the theme of this episode, is because you prioritize emotional wellness first. If you don't have, yourself together and your mind right, then everything else falls apart. And to tie it back to, student anxiety, I feel like a lot of times the messaging for high achieving students when they're feeling anxious or when they're feeling stressed is just to tough it out. Like, this is the path you chose. You got to tough it out. It's yes, you're anxious. So what? That's life. So especially in such a vulnerable time like this for students, when is it appropriate to tell them, this is a good lesson to learn. You got to be tough. And when is it appropriate to say, all right, it's okay to take a break and restore and make sure that you're mentally prepared to continue?
I think the latter has to always be present, right? Because me assessing your wellness just in a conversation, right? And I'm not doing this as a clinician and you're coming to me for some type of therapeutic services, but I think this is going to really inspire the adults in our learning spaces and just in most spaces with our young people to take on the latter, that just take a minute to reset. Because where I am at 43 years old, a licensed clinician for practically 20 years is very different than where my chemistry teacher is, who's been doing this for high school, and that 15-year-old student that is just coming into high school and just figuring all of this out virtually, right? Because we are all in different spaces. My training, my experience, and I would always be transparent. I tell myself I may look like I have it together, but sometimes Kamisha is sitting in a place just like, I need to check out for a minute. I just need to walk, I'll put some kids down and I just need to walk out to the curb. Like, put my face to the sky. Sometimes I'm in prayer and I am just like in tears because it's even the best of us struggle. So I definitely think that the latter is important for us to just check in where we are between head and heart. Now there are those places, and even with my own children, right? I have a 17-year-old that is graduating and looking to go to the service. It was, well, I didn't pass my ASVAB by 2 points, so I'm just going to focus on my job. No, that's what we're not doing. No, that's not going to be the ministry. That's what we're not doing. So if that's a moment where you're going to tough it out because you are selling your own self short on what you've committed to yourself, and you had a road obstacle and you got frustrated. Now, frustration is not an opportunity to quit and to just bow out, right? That's a growth. That's a capacity builder. And our young people are sometimes discouraged by things that are capacity builders and roadblocks for them, right? And there is no journey that you're going to teach that smooth sailing that's going to get you to greatness. Not one at all. So I think when I have those conversations with students, and my child included, what was your initial goal? This isn't my goal, but what was your initial goal? And then start to work backward from there. And I still have to tie in head and heart. So you're frustrated. I'm going to validate and I'm going to acknowledge that. You're frustrated. But how are you built? You were not built to just function subpar. You're not built to give up. We're not making you into that. Because when you needed to learn that TikTok video, wah, 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 wah. No, you didn't say, oh my God, I couldn't figure it out. I couldn't figure out how to do it. No, you didn't give up. You had 3 friends that showed it to you. It's like 5, 6, 7, 8, and you push through. Have that transferability here.
That is so true. That is so true. And y'all know me. I'm the first one to say, tough it up, and stick it out and all that. But you're right. I mean, I say that though, but I say that understanding that they also need to understand how to balance everything, because like everything is about balance. You have to find balance in all those things. Unfortunately, like most of the times they're telling me is at the 11th hour, so I have no choice but to now tell you guys stick it out. Most of the time they wait until the last minute to tell you they need help. Like we're not. I can't help you now. You got to really push through. So we do have to, at least in the beginning, when we bring in incoming freshmen, for example, we have to explain to them all the time that you have to set that time aside. You have to seek out balance. We had a class actually called Working and Learning from Remotely. And all of that was built into how to I want to say self-medicate, but how to help yourself get through, taking a step back, taking a breather, go for a walk, understand that you pace yourself. A lot of our students, and I shouldn't even say students, a lot of people are very unorganized. And what this should have done is made us a lot more organized. Now I'm living by a calendar. If I don't have the calendar in my calendar, I don't get notification. Next thing I know, I look up, it's 3 hours later, and so we have to be more organized so we can even put in that time a break, for an hour, I'm not doing anything, right? And put in the calendar. But that's part of making sure that we build in that time for us so that we don't get burnt out, because you don't want to wait till the last minute and now you have to do it. Now you have to do it, because if you don't do it, you fail, you lose everything, and you don't want to be put in that position. And then you're even more stressed out, so we have to Kamisha's point, doing that latter, what you said, the balancing part, but do it early so you don't have to get to the point where now you have to tough it out and just push it through the best way you can.
So maybe let's explore that some more then. This is something I was going to ask out of curiosity. You mentioned, students getting into this state of overwhelm, due to their own choices, and then they can't check in with themselves because they got to meet a deadline or whatever. Kamisha, what are your tips in how to check in throughout the semester, throughout the week, throughout the day? What can students do to make sure that they have the mental strength to perform and to feel okay?
So one thing we do with our students is that we ensure that they have a village, right? Who are your safe places and your safe people? We all need that, right? No matter what we're doing, no matter where we're going, And it could be a peer, because a lot of times our young people are looking to their classmate, their peer, to kind of give them support. But I also remind them they can only give you 16-year-old support. They might be able to give you 17, 18-year-old support. So I want you to find people that are going to give you support that are doing this as close to successfully as you'd like to do it. Right. Our support staff, between our social workers, our guidance counselors, our school-based support staff, and also for our special education students, our child study team, those are your definitely identified supports because they're assigned to you. Find out who are your teachers, who in your family. Some parents may not always be the best support because sometimes as parents, me included, will kind of want to think a little more critical and kind of itemize all of the things that you need to do. And I have to kind of pull myself back, even with my 6-year-old, right? So it's really important that they, one, identify those people and share transparency. You may not be as transparent with everyone, but people need to know where you're feeling. And know that no one's expecting you to master this. You're 16, 17, 20, 21. Like you are just starting to adult. And you're adulting in an environment and a global experience that in my 43 years of life, I've never seen, right? There have been things that have shut down a city, a state. Not even in my life when an entire country has been shut down. I think the closest thing to a national shutdown is probably grocery stores and restaurants on Christmas. That's the extent in the United States where like, you can't really go to the movies. You can't get to Walmart. McDonald's is closed. The grocery store, you can't go get, like your pepper turkey. That's the closest thing to anything that shuts down. But that is known. We are prepared for that. That's not an unnecessary experience. It doesn't heighten our anxiety. It frustrates us, but it doesn't heighten us. So them seeing that and knowing that these are very different times, and you have to start creating spaces that you didn't have before. I think like Lincoln said, one thing is that this is requiring us to create some structure and some organization to our life. Sometimes our kids have, and I think one thing that's hard for them, our young people, in my high school and even in our real world academy young people, is that their life is kind of structured by a system that's already set for them. You need to go to this class. You need to get these credits. You need to go here. You need to be at work at this time. Now I could literally be in my bed, roll over in my pajamas and log into a meeting. And there's no accountability unless the person is telling you to turn on your camera, right? I can keep it very professional from the waist up, and I could have just done a yoga class from the waist down or a Zumba class, right? Like you could really have on basketball shorts under the Adidas jacket, and I would have no idea. I just know that Domenico looks like on point, fabulous. Everything is in the back is ready.
Listen, that's exactly what's going on over here too. Let's go.
So like they have to create like this is now going to push them into some things that they may not have done. I'm like Lincoln. I have to start living on a camera because everything is happening in my space. So I'm like, okay, 10:15, Jamal, you're supposed to be in your amplified knowledge block. All right, it's time for me to give Micah, a snack for him to have. And, my baby can read is over. And in 45 minutes, I have my social work meeting, but I got to prepare for my, I have to be this organized. And the reality is a lot of us, I was not that color personality A person where I lived on Post-its and checklists. No, I keep a lot in my hair. Under this bun is a lot of memory under this bun. Right on the right side. There's a lot of memory under this bun.
Same here.
Domenico, go ahead, Lincoln.
I just wanted to put, talk about one thing, but also put a couple things in context because I felt like whenever I watch podcasts or shows like this, there's a lot of information going out and people are saying some really great things, but then the watchers take it and then try to apply it to everything. And things should be done we should shape things through context, right? And so, when we talk about students and their lack of choice, it doesn't mean that students are making bad choices per se. It means that they're making the best choices of what they are aware of. And that's what we find is that and this is what we all do, right? If you don't know, you only do what you know. And a lot of us don't. What we find is that a lot of students aren't even aware of a lot of options. And so that shows a failure on us as a society, where we're not teaching our children how to think critically, how to analyze, how to be patient, how to search for options, or even telling them options. A lot of times what we've done is given them directions, and they go with that. And then they learn just from that experience of being told, go left, go right. So now they only know when they get older, I know to go left, I know to go right, and that's it, because that's all I've been told. What we don't do is ask them at 5 years old, 6 years old, what direction you think would be best for you? And why do you think that's good? See, that begins a thought process. So when they get older, even when there's very little information available, they know how to at least think these things through. And what we're finding is that their options that they make, what we consider bad, are just the best options that they have at that time for the situation that they were prepared for. And so I think that we should be just putting that in the context, because a lot of times I know that we sometimes tell our students that you're making bad choices, and we don't really understand why they're making these choices. And it's not like that. And so the other thing I want to talk about was the failure piece, because I know we talked about failure, and I think, Kamisha, you hinted to that. And with failure, a lot of time, and I think Ellen mentioned failure in her first podcast, and how young people today are afraid of failure. And if you can, for parents that are listening, even for teachers who are educating at younger ages, we have to expose our children to things that will cause them to fail, right? Because they have to go through failure to know it's okay to fail. And that's how you learn, is how you come better, and help guide them through the process of recovering from failure. I mean, now we're dealing with students who don't want to even entertain an opportunity that's foreign to them, don't want to entertain something that they don't know about, because they're afraid that they won't do well at it. And that's what we need to be. We have to challenge them, especially now with the NCI. We're finding that the college students are in that space, which is a horrible space to be in, because then they don't take risks. They don't challenge themselves. And this is the last time where they can take those risks, challenge themselves, fail, and no one would ever care. I tell them all the time, you start a student organization, you think about starting a business. Start a student organization. It's the same thing as starting a business. You still got to figure out how to make some money. You still got to have a target audience. Still got to know what you're going to sell. What are you providing? And if you flop at it, no one knows. And guess what? You use student activity funds to fund the whole thing. You ain't spend no money. So guess what? Why are you not trying to start a business through your school and let them pay for it? And guess what? If it flops, you just walk out, and nobody would know that you failed.
Just don't do that as an adult.
Come on, exactly. And then, and same thing for internships, right? You can go to internship, realize that you're really not good at that job, realize that you hated everybody there, and you can walk out of internship and no one would even care that you had an internship or not, right? You don't even have to put on your resume. No one would ever know, right? This is what we're supposed to be educating our children on, of taking these opportunities, do not be afraid of them, so that they won't miss out and they won't be stressed about trying to find the perfect job, the perfect situation. They stress themselves about getting it right. They stress themselves a lot about getting it right, and it should not be about that.
You know what? I think a lot of our young people just have this experience of adultification early on, right? Where at a young age, their parents, their guardians, people around them are like, you need to know this. And I sometimes have to check myself with my 6-year-old, because he's a very insightful 6-year-old and very articulate. And sometimes we take that ability to speak well, or their ability to communicate well or socialize well, that they have those critical thinking skills. And I didn't learn these critical thinking skills until I was later, but my mother was an English teacher. So it was always Bloom. I'm like, who's my Uncle Bloom? Like, because you talk about Bloom all the time. Like, she was always talking about Bloom's taxonomy and the ability in this critical thinking levels. I know for our young people, like, social media is great, but it is, it's rough, because everything on them is, everything that they see is like sheer perfection. Right. I paid off my school loans, $80,000 my school loans in 3 years, and I made $23 an hour. Right. How their image, how they look. Everyone's walking around with this perfect body, perfect hair, perfect jaw structure. There's so many things to augment your life so that it comes across perfect. And no one talks about the journey, right? And Lincoln, we're probably a little closer in age than maybe Anthony and Domenico. And I love saying that because then, I can kind of like, people are like, what, you're 43? And I'm like, yes, 43. But like, we probably are coming from a generation where the journey and the experience was there, right? We didn't really shortcut a lot of those things.
You couldn't.
I love, like, I didn't grow up, there was no Uber, there was no cab. Like, it was fun. Like, here's the paper, this is the bus route. Let me figure out how to take the 5 to the 20. Like, there are small things like that seem so simple that were areas where I worked on my critical thinking skills, right? Even if it was dating, I wasn't like, emoji, silly face. No, it was like, what are you doing? When you going to your third period class?
Right.
Let me know. Like, I had to work on my written skills so that my written skills went before to prepare me for my oral expression to be able to engage in a conversation to seal the deal. I got the girl. Domenico, you got the waves. I'm just saying, brother, you know that right there. People are gonna be like, okay, I'm like, you got red hair. It's so cute. I love him. Anthony's like a doctor. I'll take it.
But you're right. Can you imagine the note in class that you wrote and no one can understand what you wrote? Like, you wouldn't get no date. Like, people be like, what is, and then they'll talk about it because they'll pass it to their friend, like, can you read this? And now everybody knows that you can't write. You know what I'm saying? Now everyone is shorthand is WTH and HRY. And you got like 6 words that's only 3 characters long, and everybody knows what it says. And it's 5 emojis.
Exactly, right? Exactly.
Like, I mean, come on.
And I think that, like, for as adults, right, we have to create these opportunities for our young people that engage them in these critical thinking skills. Because when we've mastered them, then we kind of assume like they should just know it.
No.
Well, they're much more tech savvy. They have many more resources provided to them. Like they expect this generation of students to navigate, but these are basic things that external resources can't do. I can't teach you how to critically think. I can't teach you.
And I just want to jump in really quick because you mentioned these 2 things. One, tech savvy. And I want to put things in context. They're not tech savvy. They know how to operate a cell phone. We assume that they're tech savvy because they grow up in a digital era. But the reality is that it goes back to fundamentals. If no one teaches you, if you don't sit down and actually learn it, you just won't know it just from osmosis. And so we have naturally assumed that they just come out of the womb, wow, ready to work a computer, and they really don't. We found this out this summer. Like, they didn't know how to do that. And it was something else you mentioned, like they feel the tech savvy, and it was something else you just mentioned. I was like, we just naturally assume these things because that this is the generation they live in. But the reality is, if they haven't been taught, because we don't bother teaching them, because we just think that they just raise up in that space. But you're right. I just want to cut it with that really quick. But yes.
And it reminds me of with Domenico when you were in high school, his interest was in music entrepreneurism, being a musical artist, being a producer, and there was just no offerings for that for you. And so he did well. He did everything the school said to do. He got the grades. He was in the social scenes. His music experience was, I guess, limited to, the band and, doing that kind of, traditional brass band, type stuff. But he was extremely unsatisfied, and the emotional wellness definitely was not there. I mean, you can, I'll let you speak for yourself, but I saw it in you. And, I felt like I understand that maybe the school can't offer a custom curriculum for being a music producer, but they didn't nurture that at all for you.
Well, it goes deeper than that. It goes deeper than that, and it wasn't just me. The whole reason why I started Real World Academy is because I, by chance or by nurture, or however you want to define it, I happened to find my passion really early on in life, and I became obsessed with music since I was an infant. And so I kind of had that to carry me throughout life and throughout adolescence, whereas other students didn't. And I saw how when people don't have something to latch onto, and I think, this is where passion comes into play. When people don't have a passion or a calling or something that they're really interested in that makes them want to get up every day, they fall into anxiety and depression and all the things that we're seeing today. And it frustrated me to the core that I saw so many of my close friends who I had close relationships with develop crippling depression and anxiety. And I saw that if they had something to hold on to, like I had music, it would solve all of that. Maybe it wouldn't solve all of that, but it would make for a better emotional foundation for them. And so that's really why I started Real World Academies, because I love music. This is setting me up on a adventurous, challenging, but adventurous and exciting path. Let's open those doors to everybody.
And social isolation, anxiety, not fitting in is an underdiagnosed problem, especially in young people. We see that, and it just I feel like the social emotional wellness for your peer group was not there.
And I went to one of the top high schools in the county. So, the problem exists everywhere. And that's why I wanted you to jump in, Anthony, because you're a physician. You worked in the COVID units in March when we had our first outbreak. And I was curious if you'd be willing to unpack some of the psychological problems that you've witnessed, and maybe those have a direct correlation with some of the problems that we're seeing amongst students.
Yeah, so isolation is not specifically a pandemic problem, but the pandemic has unmasked some social isolation, but also anxieties, fears that have been magnified. So if you talk to people, and I ask people, do you feel depressed? Do you feel anxious? And everybody says yes. Where it used to be, maybe there was only a smaller portion, but how can you not? And the answer is usually, well, of course I do. Of course I do. I don't know how much is wrong to feel it, but I'm definitely feeling it. People affected by the overall mood of the pandemic, or feeling isolated from others, or seeing their loved ones get sick. It is the amount of collective depression that mankind is going through right now is unbelievable. I mean, I'm sure you see it in, wartime periods. I'm sure that World War I, World War II, there was, if you were to look at the human happiness index, I'm sure it took a plummet. But we haven't seen this for a very long time, and people don't know how to cope with it. Mm-hmm. And, we're seeing it a lot. This, even if you were not directly affected by the pandemic or somebody directly in your family, in some way or another, whether it's a change to your school, whether it's a change to your workplace, whether it's isolation, all of these things have been affected. So it's everywhere. It's absolutely everywhere.
And I want to just jump in again, because every time I listen to you, Domenico, I always say, your parents did a great job, because I just be like, and same to you, Anthony, as well. But, Domenico, just when he talks, is just like, and I see, because I see his dad and his mom, I'm just like, because let's be very clear. None of us woke up like this. Okay. Our parents shape so much of who we are by the experience, by the things they expose us to, the things they said, but letting us go out and make some friends, letting us ride a bike somewhere, the things they give us permission to do, all those things they are in total control over. And those things that they've done or allowed happen to you or for you has made you into who you are today. All of us are products of that. And so, I really think that, I want to give credit to the parents out there, and especially yours, because when, for you to think that I need to do something, not just for myself, but for some other students that's out there, and then actually work to make that happen. That's not something, again, you didn't just wake up one day and just decide. That's something that's in you, and that you then made a decision based off of that, what was already in you. And I think that a lot of students, we would be in a much better place if parents really understood the power that they had, in shaping a person to become something in the future. And a lot of times, raising children is like gambling. Like, you don't know what's going to happen. You just, you just hopefully you pray that, everything you do is going to turn out right. But, you don't see the outcome until 16 years, 17 years, 18 years later. The whole time, though, you're having a hard time. Your kids is driving you crazy. You just like can't wait for them to get out the house. But all the work you put in doesn't really show up until so much later in their lives. And so, for many parents, they get frustrated, they get short-tempered. But I tell them all the time is that you have to be patient. You have to push through, because both of you are living examples of any student, any child could be, okay? Any child could wake up and say, I want to make something happen, and not just dream about it, but actually work towards it. Because this is one thing, a lot of our students always say they want to change the world. Almost all of them say they want to do something. They want to be altruistic in some way. But 90% of them don't have the fortitude. They don't have the drive. They don't have the patience to really carry it through. They just have a dream and an aspiration. And so, it really takes, I really commend those parents that really have put in that work at grades at 0 years old to 6 years old to really create that foundation for which we all now as adults can build on.
Yeah, I agree. I agree completely. And I think to expand that even further, just family in general, the parents, obviously, but family in general has the potential to provide that nuclear support system that allows, younger generations to flourish. And a lot of the reason why I had such confidence to pursue Real World Academy when I was young is because of Anthony's success when he was in medical school doing the mentorship program. So, there's a lot of nuance to that story, and yes. But I definitely agree. Family support early on is complicated, impossibly complicated, but necessary to do what we want to do.
And there's the right way to do family support, and there's the wrong way to do family support. There's the example of the rich kid who has everything. Anything is at his disposal. He wants training in this. He has a music coach come and do this. He wants this. This is done. And ultimately, there's, we all know the tale of the rich kid that just is born with the silver spoon in their mouth, and then they kind of grow up entitled and they don't really develop any skills because everything is handed to them. Then there's the quote unquote rich kid that's like Domenico's situation, where he did have those resources. He had access to a lot of things and he actually made them happen. And so it's like as far as, from parenting perspective, if you have the means, you have to make the means available to your child, but you also have to know when to make the child work, even if the means are there, if that makes any sense. You have to make your child realize the value of creating their own experiences and doing things on their own. But yet, you're more likely to succeed if you have parents that can, and it's not just monetary wealth, but that give you the attention that you need. So it's a really tough balance.
And I think that's a larger metaphor for universities. Students arrive in universities and there's a ton of resources at their disposal, like you had mentioned, Lincoln. But it's really up to them to be able to take advantage of those resources and craft a future for themselves.
Well, Kamisha, I want to bring you in because, we're talking about parents. We're talking, you are a parent, and but you also are trained in the art of child psychology and how to understand how we all work and tick inside of our heads. And I think, the numbers show things, stats show things, true. But I think that I tend to challenge a lot of that because, we tend to assume that poverty equals this, wealth equals this, right? Poverty equals failure, wealth equals success. And we all, us here also understand that's not clear cut either. But I wanted for us to challenge that and put it into a better context, because when we can look at people in the past, right? We look at any historical figure who was born in the log cabin and, who was raised in the wilderness, but then became this great lawyer or doctor or president or whatever have you. So we know that it's not necessarily monetary wealth that equals anything, to be quite honest. It's not guarantee anything. And we also know that, when there's a lot of students that do come out of wealth that have a lot of other issues that people who may be poor don't have, right? But one time I was talking to my cousin who was a psychologist, and he actually was working at Rutgers at the time. And I thought that, the world's biggest problem is everybody's selfish. And he was like, no, Lincoln. He said, the biggest problem is that everyone lacks love, and the reason why they're selfish is because of the love. So love is the foundation. And he said, when you peel back all the layers of any student you sit down and you talk to, you realize you get to it is that at 4 or 5 or 6 years old, they missed something that is centered around the love that they needed at that time just wasn't given. And they never fully recovered from that. And what we find is that we spend so much time trying to fill that void that only a parent can give, right? And that's why we have multiple partners, we have multiple children, we have we're looking for all these external things. We're looking for someone to like everything we post and share everything we post. And we're looking to be like, we want everyone to idolize us or feel attracted to us because we want what no one else can really give, something only our parents could have given us and did not give us at the time. And keep in mind, a parent could do all they can. This is not beating up parents and saying parents are not doing all they can. Because a parent can do all they can. But the question is, and I even go to my family. One of my siblings had an issue with a parent with one of because we have different moms and dads too, and one of my siblings had an issue with our dad, and she had all these things that she had in her head of what happened, right? And I was just like, that's not true. That's not true. And of all the things that she could have, it was just maybe 1 or 2 things. But see, it just highlights how it only takes 1 or 2 things that sticks with your child, that takes them all of it. Even my best friend, his sister brings up things like just 1 or 2 things. I'm like, throughout your whole childhood, that's all you remember is just that one thing? You know what I mean? That as an adult, you probably wouldn't even have paid attention to. You probably wouldn't even thought it was that important. But to your child at that time, it was very important. And your child has kept that and carried that for 30 years. And the whole time you didn't even know that was something big. And so I say it to say that it's so easy for parents to miss it. It's so easy for parents to miss it if they're not really, really paying attention. And then again, if you're a single parent or if you're 2 parents, look, Kamisha, you're like, listen, you're working overtime doing all this stuff. It's so easy. I know you think about it all the time. Did I miss something? Am I going to miss something? Because you still have to provide. You still have to take care of yourself. It's not easy. It really is not easy. So I probably said too much, but Kamisha, can you follow up on that? Let me know your thoughts.
I was actually thinking about that when Anthony and Domenico shared, and they were, just amazing shares, absolutely amazing shares. And I think about myself and a friend I live with, across the street, grew up in LA, and the trajectories of our lives were very, very different. But our upbringings, our family dynamics were very, very similar. And so Erickson has this developmental stage. I think it goes between maybe about age 5 to age 12-ish. And it's called industry versus inferiority, right? And in this stage, this is where kids are just learning how to these basic fundamental skills, how to read, how to write, how they interact with people, how they socialize, how they're gaining their peer support, their interactions, building friends. And a lot of that is how they build their self-esteem. And if they don't have these fundamental things, then they just feel inferior. So Lincoln, just kind of going backwards from what you were saying, right? You have the missed thing that parents do is, what am I doing to build a self-esteem? And that looks different in different households, different cultural backgrounds, what your cultural lens is and how that ties into economically where you are, demographically where you are, those things play into it. And, I'm always working, pouring into, I'm a social worker. So I'm always pouring into kids. And I have to tell myself, am I pouring too much into someone else's kid and forgetting my own? My mother was a teacher, and we lived across the street from the middle school she was. And kids always like, Miss Mays, can I come play in your backyard? Miss Mays, can I play volleyball? Like, our house was this big, but the backyard was this big. And I had a half of a court of a basketball, had a tether ball in the back. So kids always wanted to come to my neighborhood. And I was like, she don't really play with me like that, but that was my mother. She was like pouring into kids. And sometimes adults, parents, not that they're always intending, they're just trying to life, right? They're just trying to manage life and provide, especially now. Like, PSE&G is only going to allow forbearance not so long, right? You can tell your landlord, I'm not paying rent, but at some point in time, their mortgage lender is going to expect a payment, either in a lump sum or put that on the back of the loan. And there are so many things and spaces, and this is like the unfortunate part during this pandemic, are those things that are really building their self-esteem, right? I think as those people within the artistic community, this time is a little difficult because that ability to express and engage, like if I'm creating an amazing piece on a guitar in isolation and I'm kind of sharing it virtually, it's very different. And I'm a singer, so it's very different if I'm having this vocal experience in this setting versus if I'm just in a room. My grandmother was a jazz artist, so to have a piano playing, percussions, brass, like all of these things, like you just feel like you grow in that space, right? So one thing that I worry about is what's kind of pouring into our young people and helping them build their self-esteem. In our various communities, in our resource deficient communities, right? And our economically strained communities, you have kids that are, and I was that kid. My mother was a cocaine addict. My father was a cocaine addict. My grandmother, my family, they had a history of it. My aunt would say, if we can drink it, snort it, smoke it, shoot it, however we can do it, that was my family background. Mm-hmm. And thank by the grace of God, my mother's deliverance from her addiction was in my, pre-teens. But I remember some aspects of that. But I knew that I needed to not engage in this cycle, right? I didn't want to be a kid that had a life where their father wasn't around, or their mother was working during the daytime, at nighttime, on the weekends, right? So that was my motivator. So even though my mom was not around and she wasn't planting certain seeds, I know she was doing them unintentionally, or even just kind of sowing little seeds, I had a village enough that kind of held me accountable. And I remember, like you talked about those bookmarks, right? They're emotional experiences in our life. These bookmarks are tied to an emotion. I had a 6th grade teacher, Robert Kenya. He looked like Robert Redford, probably with less lips and just like a real, like nice kind of shortcut, right? He had Levi jeans before Levi's, I think, were even like jean material. They were just like that polyester, right? He had them and he wore like these boots and he would always say, capiche, capiche. And I was like, what? What is he talking about? But literally, Mr. Kenya, I remember because he would have these, like, he'd tell me to run for senior class president, see leadership in me. He would pull me to the side and tell me about the opportunities where I didn't show up in my learning spaces. He saw where I had my own self-doubt on my intellectual ability, right? He saw how well I could socialize with people and I could get anybody to join my team. Like, he saw these things in me. And I stayed in contact with Mr. Kenya until I graduated from grad school. So I was in elementary in 1989. That's when I remember having a Dare t-shirt, a black, like almost like Adidas kind of jacket like Domenico has on, but it wasn't Adidas, because that clearly was not in my economic ministry. And I was standing there with my little ponytail to the side, me and my buns to the side, and it was a ponytail to the side back then. And that was 6th grade. I let him know when I graduated from middle school, from high school, and the March before I graduated from college, I reached out to him, and it took me forever. They had moved to Vegas from California, and his wife had mentioned that he had just died like that month prior. And I was like, when I tell you I called my mom, I was devastated. And she said, tell me your name again. I said, Kamisha Hill. She said, capiche, Kamish? I was a part of his family for all of those years, that his wife knew who I was. His son was in the background like, oh yeah, that was the girl that was the class president. And I'm like, you took me home with you. And for me, that was mind blowing because this is a white man. You know, like I grew up in a very militant home, and that mattered to me, that someone that didn't look like me had that investment in me, right? So it was even more important when I had the people that looked like me in every area, church, when I was at the local park, my neighborhood, they would watch, not knowing, you know, from my mom, they would watch, make sure people weren't sneaking inside my house or some boy around, like whatever that was. And so I think as parents have to be intentional about our network that we build around our young people, right? I don't care if you are getting Medicaid, Medicare, or if you have a Rising Blue Cross Blue Shield or Aetna. Your dollar does not determine how you invest in that child, because that's priceless. That is not tangible, right? That's nothing that you're gonna. That's not a source that you can just say I can put money in that. That's a priceless investment in your young people, and we have to do that. And we have to remember that even when we become an economic status above where we started, like I'm not that urban poor kid that I was. But I still hunger, like I'm hungry for success, right? I'm hungry for my Black boys to be successful. So I have to know, like, I know what the realities of the world are like. I know what this utopic environment in my head could be like. How am I preparing them for the best?
Go ahead, preach.
Take a sip of my water.
We're gonna have to have an offering table, offering challenge walk around next time. Plate has to go around next time.
Well, I think that's a wonderful way to leave this off. We're already at an hour, believe it or not. So thank you so much, Kamisha, for joining us. We'd love to have you back.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Lincoln and Anthony, of course. And we'll catch you all next time for another episode of Keeping It Real with Real World Academy. Thank you for listening to the Keeping It Real podcast by Real World Academy. If you're a student looking for a mentor or a parent looking to help your kid design a happy life and a successful career, visit our website at realworldacademy.org and subscribe to us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and wherever you listen to podcasts to hear more exclusive content on how to design your future.